Welcome to the very first episode of the Mile High Flight Show, where a Jets fan and a Broncos fan get together to talk about the NFL and other sports. I'm your host, Ryan Marinholtz, alongside Enrique Cisneros. And I have to say, I'm really excited to get into this. How about you, Enrique?
Absolutely. What's up, Ryan? Super excited. Got tons of stuff to talk about, not just Broncos. Obviously, the Broncos had huge stuff going on to
To
start
say
out
the
the off
least.
season. But we'll start out with some of the other stuff first. Obviously, the big one in Cleveland, Deshaun Watson waiving the no trade clause to go to the Browns. How do we feel about that?
Man, it's interesting because it got down to it. It took what, like a year and a half to get to this point, and then it was down to we thought the Falcons and the Saints, and he said no to the Browns, and he turns around and he's like, yeah, actually, you know what? Never mind. Let's go to the Browns, and it's huge for them. But he's got his own thing going on. He might get suspended, and that's a heck of a contract. Every single penny guaranteed. Oof.
Yeah, that's a big contract. That was the other thing that I was wondering as well was how done is the legal case? I know that he didn't face any criminal charges, and I don't want to get too into the legal stuff about it, but that's a big thing. Obviously, the Browns must have felt very comfortable whether he was going to get suspended or not suspended. And then obviously fully guaranteed 5 year, $230 million. That's a lot of money that you're putting on your franchise quarterback, and you already now have bad blood with your previous franchise quarterback that you have to shop now. And now, you if you're gonna have Deshaun sit any amount of time, I just think that's a bad taste for Browns fans if you ask me for sure. But
Absolutely, absolutely.
I do think he's worth it for sure because I mean, you have Patrick Mahomes and all these other great quarterbacks that, like we saw Joe Burrow last year, but everyone forgot about Deshaun Watson, and that's understandable because obviously he's playing for the Texans. Texans are a bad team. He didn't want to play there anymore and didn't get an opportunity to play last year. But yeah, I think of the teams that he could have chosen, I think Cleveland was by far the best choice for him. And I mean, I just hope it all works out at the end of the day.
Yeah, man, I agree. And you brought up a lot of good points. And, I do think that they probably have the strongest roster out of the teams that were in on him. The connection to his hometown in Atlanta was kind of interesting, and it seemed like that's where it was going to go for a second. But the Browns is definitely in the last few years has came on strong as an organization and built up that roster. And kind of ironically, as you mentioned about Baker, he's the one that almost spurred that on when he came and had some success for once with the Browns. And that's why a lot of those free agents came and made that roster as strong as it is. And now they're kind of just tossing him to the side, you know? And it's like, but at the same time, also, it's kind of the way it's played out. They're not going to get anything for him on the open market because everybody knows he doesn't want to be there and the Browns don't want him. So it's just a bad situation all around on that end, but definitely a good spot for Deshaun Watson football wise.
Yeah, and I definitely feel for Baker too because I agree with your point. I feel like Baker, and this is something we've always known about Baker Mayfield, and this is why he was one of my favorites coming out into the NFL. Baker plays with a lot of swag, dude. Baker plays with a lot of
Yeah.
swag, he plays with a lot of
Yeah.
confidence, and I feel like the fans, the city, and a lot of his teammates like got that from him and wanted to play for Cleveland and like Baker was proud to be in Cleveland. I mean, look at the commercials. Like,
Yeah,
it's
man.
just it's terrible.
I'm
But
with you there.
yeah, I think regardless of what Baker goes and does, and obviously we'll get into some Baker stuff. I think he's going to be good. I'm still a believer in Baker Mayfield. I know that there's his doubters for sure, and I have my personal problems with him, but I think it's kind of almost like a Carson Wentz type situation. Maybe he got, and hopefully he doesn't shit the bed like Carson did in
You're
Indy,
right.
but Hopefully Baker's able to go somewhere that, just needs a swaggy young mobile quarterback. You know what I mean? That's what I'm hoping for Baker. Because I just think he deserves that, especially because I mean, there's definitely no quarterback competition now. Like, it's
Oh, for sure,
by
for
far
sure.
they
Well,
mortgaged the whole franchise for Deshaun Watson.
and he doesn't want to be there anymore anyways, with the way that they treated him, and but there's plenty of other teams that will take him. It looks like the Colts, maybe Seattle is a good option after the Russell Wilson trade that we'll talk about in a second. So there's definitely options for him out there. And to help out Deshaun Watson on the Browns, another one of our big names in free agency is actually Amari Cooper. Before this trade went down, got traded over to the Browns from the Cowboys for just a 5th round pick. So, Jarvis Landry left in free agency, so at least they're picking that wide receiver room back up a little bit. But definitely an interesting situation going on around there.
I think it's interesting because if the Browns' plan was to bring in Deshaun Watson, right, which I agree, if that's your plan, you're gonna make this franchise-altering move to do that. Why not hang on to Jarvis Landry? Why not?
Right.
You kept David Njoku, who I mean, he's one of those like weird tight ends for me. Sometimes he shows out, sometimes he doesn't. So I'm not just a big fan of them because I think they put the franchise tag on him if I'm remembering correctly.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And then you let Jarvis go. Odell's gone, so you have what's his name? People's Hope. Is that
Donovan Peoples-Jones? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you got Donovan Peoples-Jones. Sorry, and then you got Amari Cooper and the running game, obviously. And the Browns, now that they have a quarterback, they're going to have a bit more balanced attack. And I say now that they have a quarterback, taking a shot at Baker. Sorry, Baker.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's Deshaun Watson. It's Deshaun Watson. But
Right.
I like the Cooper. I like the Cooper trade. I like it a little bit better for the Browns because I still think that Amari's got a few more years in him. And I think he's going to be. I think before Deshaun Watson came to the Browns, Amari Cooper was probably going to be, in that 600, 700 yard, 6 touchdown category. Now I see him being, a 1,000-yard receiver again. Maybe not an outstanding year, but just a very solid year. And I think it was a good move for the Browns. I think the Cowboys kind of lost on it personally. But I mean, they had to get rid of him, so I get it.
Yeah, well, and the Cowboys have been losing a lot in free agency so far, unfortunately for them. But and I do think you're right on the Amari Cooper situation in the sense that he's elevated, or he's getting a better quarterback in Deshaun Watson than Dak Prescott, and same for the Browns organization in general. I think you're going to see, although that wide receiver room looks outside of Amari Cooper to be sort of weak right now, with the loss of Jarvis Landry and Odell before that, Deshaun Watson is the type of quarterback that's going to elevate who's there. You know what I mean? In the same way that Russell Wilson is to the Broncos. And it's like he's going to change the perception of those players this upcoming year because they're just going to have more success with a better quarterback, So it'll be interesting to get into the season and see how successful they can be year one, if he's even on the field, Deshaun Watson is, depending on how that suspension works out and all that. But anyways, so we don't want to spend too much time on the Browns, as interesting as that topic is, because we could talk about that forever. A couple more big names in free agency here. We have J.C. Jackson going to the Chargers, 5 years, $82 million and 40 guaranteed. That is a heck of a move. And on top of that, the Chargers went and got Khalil Mack for a 2nd and a future 6th. So, on the AFC West, there's plenty of moves to talk about there. The Chargers are certainly beefing up.
The Chargers are beefing up. I love everything that the Chargers did. Every single thing that the Chargers did.
Yeah.
You obviously, because over there, still in the same division, the Raiders just traded for Devontae Adams. Yep. A huge deal. And
what else can you say about the AFC West right now? The AFC West is just stacked. You have the Raiders beefed. You have the Chargers beefed up. Broncos beefed up. And I mean, the Chiefs are the Chiefs. They still got Patrick Mahomes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you talk about the Broncos adding Russell Wilson, just every team, it's an arms race as many people have said in the last few days here. Everybody sees what the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes are doing, and they say, well, it runs through them. We got to be better than that. And that's a hard ask. So, but all those teams are certainly trying for sure. All right. So up next, we have our underrated signings. And my first one I was looking at was Foye Oluokun to the Jags, 3-year deal, $45 million and $28 million guaranteed. That does work out to be the fourth most expensive inside linebacker contract at the moment in the NFL. I think that does. Obviously, a lot of people are saying it's an overpay, and it does look that way on the surface. But I do think Oluokun is a young, rising talent that is going to be good for the Jags. And I think in a couple of years, that price is not going to be as bad as it looks right now, especially if he turns out to be as good as he can be with his ceiling. And obviously it's a big if, but a lot of people don't like that signing, and I thought it might turn out better.
Yeah, and I agree for sure. And I really do think that the Jags are just in, like, they're in the bad team mode where they have to overpay for guys sometimes. And I think that that's why the stigma that maybe it's an overpay. But I agree for sure. I think that he's super, super underrated talent wise. And yeah, once that level of play evens out a little bit, it's almost going to be a bargain for him, if I'm being honest with you. I'm gonna go ahead and say one of my underrated signings is probably going to have to be, it's really crazy that it's an underrated signing, but Marcus Williams going to the Ravens.
Yes.
I think that's hugely underrated because the Ravens have had a solid secondary, and I think Marcus Williams is going to put them truly into the elite territory. And even more so, we still have a bunch of draft rumors that they might still be working on that secondary in Baltimore due to the draft. And I think the Marcus Williams pick goes from, I mean, it is a lot of money, 5 years, 70 million and 37 mil guaranteed. That's a lot of money, but this is a player stepping into his prime. You know what I mean? Like I think he's just going to establish himself as the next great Baltimore safety. Like I see it. I think it's going to be perfect.
I love it. And I love that you brought it up because I think that is a signing normally that you wouldn't say is underrated based on the player that we know Marcus Williams is and the amount of years and the money involved. But because of all of the gigantic, not just big, but gigantic names that have been swirling around in this free agency with Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, who didn't even go anywhere. I think Marcus Williams signing was definitely something that kind of flew under the radar. And I think you hit it spot on that it's a great fit. I think that he's young enough that it's very much worth investing, and he's going to grow and blossom there into a different player. I absolutely love that pick, and I agree with everything you said. So for my second underrated signing, I'm actually going to go with my Denver Broncos, and I'm going to mention Eric Tomlinson that came over from the Ravens, and he is a primarily blocking tight end, but I think that's why a lot of people wrote it off as a kind of a nothing burger. And, looking on the surface, you're like, oh, they signed an untalented tight end. But with Nathaniel Hackett coming in, a brand new head coach, he's going to focus a lot on the running game. And you look at up there in Green Bay at what they do with Tanyan and a lot of the other guys up there, they're very high on their blocking tight ends and how they utilize them, and they're very creative. So, and I think Eric Tomlinson is a very good young piece for specifically that, and it was a good cheap deal, and I think that was a good underrated signing as well.
All right. So for my second underrated signing, I have to go back to the team that you initially brought up, which is the Jacksonville Jaguars. And even though I do not agree with paying Christian Kirk that much money, I do love that they paid Zay Jones because I love me some Zay
Yes.
Jones. Zay Jones is he's one great underrated player that is still very young, and obviously he had his time with the Raiders. And every time I saw Zay Jones on the field for the Raiders, he was making plays. Sure hands, great attitude, a guy that just wants to be great. And I think as the Jaguars are trying to establish a culture, that's exactly the type of guys you need. You need guys that want to go down there and want to get to work. And especially with Trevor Lawrence, wanting to establish a new culture because obviously Urban Meyer, fucked a bunch of shit up. So you got to have guys that are willing to come in and try to reestablish that culture. And I think Zay Jones is one of those guys. And I think that Trevor Lawrence is going to have a good time throwing the ball to him.
Absolutely. I'm totally with you there. You heard Derek Carr talk about him all year, and I think he was there last year as well. Is just like you mentioned, his attitude and his will to win and will to work, and put in that work. It almost kind of reminded me of when the Browns initially signed Jarvis Landry, although Landry was a bigger name. In the sense that he's that, like you mentioned, locker room guy that's going to help establish a culture in a place that doesn't have that culture of winning and that attitude, so I think that is an underrated signing for sure. And that's going to work out to be a good signing for them. So to move on to our next big thing, our favorite story of the week. Now, for me, I love this one, but I don't think my co-host is going to love it as much as I did. Tom Brady decided to unretire and come back to the NFL, citing unfinished business. How are we feeling about that?
So if Tom had came back and went to another AFC East team and just decided to shit on me for more than he already has,
Yeah.
then I would be a bit more upset. But the fact that I don't think he should have. I lose a little bit of the. I just get a little bit of Brett Favre feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think he should have retired in the first place, especially if you were just going to come back in 2 months. And yeah, I don't think if I was him, I don't think the losing in the fashion that they did this last year, I don't think that sits well for me, especially when he literally brought them back within a chance to win the game, So a few things go, right for the Buccaneers, and the Buccaneers are in the Super Bowl, So it's just one of those things that I'm glad he's back because, at this point, I just want him to win 11 rings. I want so many rings. I just want him to win all of them. So, yeah, welcome back. Welcome back.
No, I totally agree. I think, my path with him has been similar, but not the same because, I wasn't in the same division as he was for so many years. But the Broncos were always kind of enemies of the Patriots and vice versa, always hated him. And then something switched when he left New Orleans and wasn't under the grip of Bill Belichick anymore. And all of a sudden he just became way more likable to me. And so I'm kind of excited about him coming back. It's always a joy to watch the greatest of all time play football. And I totally agree that with his attitude and the way he looks at the game, for him to leave after getting so close and once again and doing everything in his power to make a comeback, and it just didn't work out that way. That wasn't the way he was going to go out. He was always going to come back. There is no way, but definitely a little bit of Brett Favre going back and forth. Maybe he'll end up on the Vikings
or the Jets for 1 year.
Or the Jets for 1 year. I forgot about that.
I'll take it. I'll take a little bit of Tom.
Zach Wilson for a future Bucks franchise quarterback.
Right, exactly. So I guess my favorite story of the week, and it'll be a quick one because we already did touch on it. I'm glad the Deshaun Watson thing is over. I'm
Yeah,
glad I'm glad, and not even to say that in like a bad way, but there's been so much media coverage on it. There's been so much, I mean, literally since last year, the talk is, where's he gonna go? He doesn't want to play for Houston. Houston gave him this giant thing, and then the criminal thing comes out. So it's even, even more up in the air and even more of a limbo thing. Now it's finally settled. He's got a new team. Obviously, there's still things that need to be settled in regards to Baker and what the Texans are going to do, what the Browns are going to do as far as finishing out the roster. But I am glad that the Deshaun Watson thing is finally settled. He's finally out of Houston. And yeah, I just, I love to see guys get the bag. I've always loved Deshaun Watson. Obviously, with him not facing any criminal charges, it's a bit easier to say I still like Deshaun Watson. But regardless of what he's done off the field or what he hasn't done off the field, when he puts on the shoulder pads, dude's a baller, So
yeah.
I'm excited to see him get his new start, and I'm excited for Cleveland, dude. I really do feel like now they have, I mean, in my opinion, the second best young quarterback, So
He's definitely in the top 5 overall of quarterbacks in the league. That's for sure. And I'm totally with you. I'm glad it kind of like the Aaron Rodgers saga. There was just fatigue around it because it lasted so long. There was so much media coverage on it, so much talking about it, and nothing happening for so long. And finally, it's resolved. We know what's going on to an extent. And yeah, it's kind of a relief for that to just be over. And I'm excited for the future of the Browns, certainly as far as winning is concerned.
yeah, it's just been a long time since the Browns have actually, I mean, like we talked about it when they like loaded up and with Baker, right? We were like, oh no, like, and they went in and won a playoff game,
Yeah,
So now they're going to be able to actually make noise because you're going to see some of these playoff matchups and you're going to be like, okay, well, the obvious weakness is that maybe Baker can't put up 4 touchdowns and 400 yards
right.
to keep in that, like, well, look what Josh Allen does, what Patrick Mahomes does. Um,
Exactly.
Deshaun can ball out. Deshaun can ball out. So I think it's actually the finale of like a true unveiling of a winning team for Cleveland. So I'm excited for sure, dude.
Absolutely. I'm with you. All right. So, our next section, I'm going to let you take this one away.
Perfect. That means that we must be talking about my New York Jets. All right. So obviously, this is the best time of the year to be a Jets fan because we're in the off season. Every single year since
Definitely.
I've been a Jets fan, this is the best time of the year, and still holds the truth because we are making moves, my friend. We are making moves.
Yes.
First and foremost, I mean, do I have to say it? We have 2 brand new tight ends that are studs. We got
Absolutely.
we got Jack Conklin coming from the Minnesota Vikings, coming off a career year with the Minnesota Vikings. And we got CJ Uzama. Is that how you say his name?
I think so. Uzoma or something like
I
that.
just, well, I love the dude, especially now that he's a New York Jet. I loved him as a Bengal, and watching him get hurt and then still
Yeah.
come out and play. Love that. Love the grittiness.
Yep.
Um, and also like the Jets haven't had, good tight ends since Dustin Keller left. So it's about time that we get 2 studs in here that want to get in, and want to work, because that's the first thing that these guys started talking about was, it's about to be dirty, it's about to be gritty, it's about to be nasty. Because yeah, these guys come to play. I mean, Conklin's coming off his last year with Minnesota, 61 catches, 593 yards, 3 tuds. Obviously, you got Kirk Cousins thrown to you, and when you have Justin Jefferson, you're definitely going to get a bit less targets, and even more so, Conklin was, the second tight end in their system. because they had Kyle Rudolph for all those years.
Yeah.
And then, CJ last year with the Bengals, 49 catches, 493 yards, 5 tuds, and when you have that many pass catchers that the Bengals have, you're just the numbers are going to be a little bit shorter, but it's the quality catches that he's getting. Every time I saw a Bengals game, this guy is securing third down catches. He's securing touchdowns in the red zone, big
Absolutely.
targets, big blockers, and guys that just want to come and play football. So I'm super excited for the new revamped tight end room for my New York Jets. Also, dude, like, let me just say, besides the tight ends, we got Lincoln Tomlinson, big guard coming from the 49ers.
Yeah.
And these are the moves that you like to see as a Jets fan. And even more so, I think every free agent that we signed is for the right price. We didn't overpay anybody like the Jets usually have to do to get good guys. We usually have to overpay guys to come here. Now, with the way Joe Douglas is handling things, if you don't want to come here and be a New York Jet for the price that I think you could come here and be a New York Jet, we just don't need you. And I love that. I love that. I love all the free agents so far. And even more so, this helps us because now we don't have to invest high draft picks into tight ends. We don't. We still can invest a high draft pick into the offensive line. I'd be okay with that. But even just the re-signings, bringing back Flacco, just to give Zach Wilson kind of that leader. He was on the roster last year with them. So just to give somebody for Zach Wilson to lean back on and ask questions. Love that Flacco's back. He was a elite quarterback back in the day, apparently.
Yeah. Yes.
Love bringing back Tevin Coleman because when Tevin Coleman was on the field for the Jets, he had a nice little spark. And absolutely love. One of my favorite things that we've done so far is bringing back Braxton Berrios because he is he's a little spark plug, dude. Like he's an offensive weapon. You just put him out there and boy plays football. And we were able to, he's super underrated. He did get that Pro Bowl nod, kick returner, so I love that. But we were able to bring him back on a contract that was much cheaper than I thought we were going to be able to. And that's the thing that I love. I thought Braxton Berrios was going to get a 3-year deal for 15 to 18 mil from the Jets. And we brought him back. I think it's a 2-year deal. $12 million total, $6 million guaranteed.
That's a really good value.
That's a really good value for a Pro Bowl kick returner that adds promising snaps on the offensive side.
Yeah. And I think he's certainly going to blossom, in the next year or so, especially with Zach Wilson. And honestly, CJ Uzomah in particular, I think was outside of Russell Wilson, obviously, maybe my favorite signing of all of free agency for any team. Because I totally agree with what you said with him on the Bengals. He was a huge part of how dominant that offense was, even though maybe his stats didn't necessarily jump out at you. If you watched those games, you saw how important he was to how their offense functioned. And, not that it crippled them when he got injured, but you could see the impact that he or wasn't making when he wasn't on the field, and so I think that adding that to a young Jets team that needs some leadership, somebody who just went through some playoff games, has a little bit of experience with that, and then he's going to be a safety net for Zach Wilson, along with aside the other tight end you guys just signed. And Braxton Berrios, like you said, super underrated, and he's only going to get better. And to your point, talking about the signings you guys have been making, I think one of the easiest ways for a bad team to stay bad is giving out those big contracts to players that are looking for the money, not only just because it's expensive and it messes with your cap situation, but also because generally speaking, those guys that are looking for the maximum amount of money possible, they don't care about what team they're going to, they don't care about team building or trying to win. Those aren't players that are going to help you build a winning culture, obviously, and so holding out for those players that want to be a Jet and want to commit to what that's going to be and make the Jets better every day, that's huge. And I love that for the Jets. And I think you guys are only getting better.
Yeah, and I agree. And I love the approach because in a lot of Jets off seasons, there's times where I felt like, we're kind of rushing things a little bit, where we know we're a bad team, but they want to kind of put these pieces together and suddenly make us some sort of contender. I don't really think that's what's happening in this Joe Douglas era. I think we're finally really putting the pieces around. I mean, because they're leaning into Zach Wilson, and
Yeah.
that's what you have to do nowadays. Is if you think you got a guy, which I think we got a guy, you lean into him. That's what the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes.
Yep.
When they played the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl and they couldn't stop a lick with that offensive line, what did they do? They went out and traded everything they could, got Orlando Brown from the Ravens. Like, they did
Yeah.
everything they could to shore up that offensive line. That's what the Bengals, will end up doing, and that's what they did when they signed Alex Kappa.
Yep.
They're leaning into their franchise quarterback, and when you lean into your franchise quarterback, one, I think you're showing that everyone believes in you. And I think that Zach Wilson is perfectly suited for New York. The New York media, I think it's perfect for him because he's a quiet, reserved kid that is not about the flash. Dude is just about the ball, So
Yeah.
that's exactly what Zach Wilson needs is more weapons, getting him more comfortable, getting him these big tight ends that he can target, getting him these big offensive linemen that he can target or that can block for him. And yeah, like Zach's been training with guys in the off season. He's flying out, he's going different places, to build that relationship and build that rapport with his teammates. And that's what you love to see. You really, really do love to see that, especially from a young quarterback.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think Zach Wilson and that entire organization has a really bright future. And, looking back on the Sam Darnold era, and you can say that with a few different quarterbacks, or you look at the Browns and those teams that were just searching for somebody, a lot of times you see potential talents get wasted because, well, yeah, you landed this guy that could be something, but you didn't build him or build around him the way that he needed. And you didn't give him the resources that he needed to be the best player that he could be. And so it didn't work out, and it's like, I agree with you that I get the opposite feeling with this Joe Douglas era with the New York Jets, that Zach Wilson is really being prioritized and taken care of. And I think it's going to work out for you guys.
Exactly. And then just to touch on some of the other guys we signed in this crazy free agency period. Jacob Martin coming from the Texans. Love it. We needed a nice pass rusher. He's young. I think he's looking to prove himself. I think he only had like 4.5 sacks last year, but in a situational role with the Jets, because I think that's what he was doing down in Houston as well. It was kind of situational pass rushing role. We got Carl Lawson, we got Quentin Williams, we got John Franklin Myers. We have guys that can kind of take some of that pressure off of him, hopefully, especially with Carl Lawson coming back. That can give him some of those one-on-one situations that I think is going to turn him from a 4.5 sack guy to an 8.5, 9.5 sack guy. And you don't even know about him. He's just out there balling out. We got Jordan Whitehead, DJ Reed. Jordan Whitehead, the safety coming from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. DJ Reed, corner coming from the Seattle Seahawks. This is exactly what we needed for our secondary, because our secondary is full of young, hungry Lions. And we needed some veteran leadership from guys that are still young themselves, but have come from solid locker rooms. Now, I don't know about Seattle's locker room entirely, but Russell Wilson was there. Bobby Wagner was there. There's a lot of good leadership that DJ Reed just got done playing with.
Yeah.
And obviously Jordan Whitehead, yeah, he was playing with Tom Brady. I think he knows something. I think Tom knows a little bit something about a winning culture. And, Jordan Whitehead's got that ring, so he's got
Yeah.
that championship experience, that championship mentality. He knows how it feels to be a part of a championship team. And so he's going to know how to bring that into the Jets organization. And that's exactly what Bryce Hall needed. That's exactly what Michael Carter needed. Just all of our nice young corners. And that I just think it was the most perfect move for our secondary altogether. And then I would really say besides that, I mean, going forward, I think the Jets definitely need to figure out the wide receiver position. And I think that's going to be through the draft. We possibly need a nice rotation running back, just to kind of switch things up between, because Coleman's nice, but he's not necessarily super consistent.
Right. Well, and he's a smaller guy too, so you probably don't want to overwork him either.
Right. And I mean, we got Michael Carter, the running back, not the cornerback, because we've got two.
Yeah.
And he's a baller. He did have that injury last year that kind of limited him a little bit. But I mean, he was backing up Javonte Williams, which, as you know, being a Broncos fan, Javonte is the man. So whatever they
Yeah.
are doing in that North Carolina running back room, they did.
Yeah.
They were doing some things for sure.
Yeah, they're doing it
So
right.
get a little rotation running back to help Mike out. We definitely need to see what's up with Mekhi Becton. And I'm not one of these Jets fans that's going to sit here and like bag Mekhi Becton, because he's a big dude. He got hurt. He wasn't able to work out. He gained weight. That's just literally how the human body works. But I think when there's smoke, there's fire, right? So if there is something going on with Mekhi, we just need to get it figured out, because we're a better football team with him on there.
Yeah.
And especially before the draft, because if we need to do something with him, or we aren't going to be truly relying on him, then we need to figure that out as well. Obviously, we need to nail this upcoming draft for sure, because otherwise, it's going to be another long year. But I feel like we were able to nail this last draft. This was the best draft class that I can remember as a Jets fan, period. Like, everyone not only, I felt like, contributed, but everyone learned. It's not like, I mean, we almost beat the Buccaneers, like
Yeah.
we were literally a play away from being Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. And I think at that time we had 3 wins to our credit. Like, it's one of those things that if we're able to knock out this upcoming draft, and get anyone that can contribute, I think it might be trouble for the AFC East for sure. I think the Jets are going to be ready to make some noise here in the next couple of years.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, that's a young upcoming roster, and they're making the right moves. And they kind of remind me, outside of having a more talented quarterback than we had during any point in that time, they remind me of the Broncos of the last few years, where there was a lot of young talent and a lot of young pieces that were kind of finding their place and learning how to win. Those are some rough years for sure. A lot of losing and a lot of heartbreak. But you guys are on the right path, and kind of seeing how that's blossoming for my Broncos now, obviously different situation, having a Hall of Fame quarterback kind of just plopped into our laps. But you guys have someone to build around. Yeah, for the second time. Yeah. But you guys have somebody to build around, and somebody who's going to lead you there, and you're taking the right path. And it's really exciting time to be a Jets fan, I bet, for sure.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we get a little bit of the same excitement that I get right now during the season, because like I said, the off season is the best time to be a Jets fan. The best time.
Yeah. Yeah, and as a Broncos fan, we've definitely felt that the last few years. But as a decent segue, I guess we can start talking about my Denver Broncos here. And I'm trying to think of really if there was anything that happened for us during free agency. I'm just not really sure. Oh yeah, that's right. Russell Wilson got traded to us.
Yeah.
So you, as you just said, for the second time, or I guess really the third time, if you think about John Elway
I was gonna say the
getting.
same thing. Like John did organize that a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah. So we have just gotten a potential Hall of Fame quarterback, kind of just given to us. We did trade away 2 first-round picks, 2 seconds, a fifth, and then Drew Lock, Noah Fant, and Shelby Harris to the Seahawks in return for Russell Wilson. And I would take that trade any day of the week. I'll tell you that much. I will say that I a little bit surprised by the trade package that we got, or that we had to give up. I kind of suspected that Locke would be part of that, especially with them not having any sort of alternative, at that point in time for a quarterback. So Locke is a good, still has some upside to him, sure. And then Fant Harris, when you look at the Denver Broncos roster, I mean, I feel like you can ask just about anybody, and you say if you can pick two players out of their whole roster that you want, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that 90% of people would not say the names Noah Fant and Shelby Harris. I think Noah Fant is definitely super talented. He has some things in his game that he could work on to be a more complete tight end. And I think he's going to take a huge step forward. I was going to say a huge step forward having a quarterback, but he doesn't have a quarterback anymore because he still has Drew Lock. Never mind. So,
Same guy. Yeah.
same guy, unless they get Baker Mayfield potentially. But
Facts.
yeah, he's a decent player, and he could be really good. But when you look at Patrick Surtain, when you look at Jerry Jeudy, like, I'm just surprised. And then Shelby Harris was the other one given up in that trade. I love Shelby Harris. He's a superb person. He's a great locker room presence, which really I think is why they wanted him. And he's a big leader. He's one of those culture establishing guys. But if I was the one making a trade and I had to give up Russell Wilson, those just would not have been the players I would have asked for. But as a Broncos fan, I'll take it because I feel like we almost got a value, which is kind of crazy to say, giving up as much as we did.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think you guys won the trade. I know like the picks are a lot, but like it is Russell Wilson. You knew you're gonna have to give up some picks. As
Yeah.
far as the players go, this is the best case scenario. I think
Yeah.
Drew Lock and Shelby Harris, and no disrespect to either of those guys, because I was a big Drew Lock guy coming out of college. But yeah, like those aren't even, I don't even think about that. Like
Yeah.
those two guys, I'm not even worried about it. Like send those guys to anyone at any time and I'd be okay.
Right.
The fact that you got Russell Wilson, to me, this trade is the picks and Noah Fant.
Yeah.
And I'm, I thought for sure, and I know I mentioned this to you off the air. I thought for sure Jerry Jeudy was gone, and
Oh, me
that was
too.
the thing. That was the thing that I thought would be the biggest problem, is because now it's like we just got Jerry Jeudy, and we haven't even seen him scratch the surface of what he can do, and he's gone.
Yeah.
So the fact that he's here with Russ, I mean, there's just, and then even more so, Albert O, baby. Like now
Yeah.
he gets the opportunity to step up and become that primary tight end. And I thought he did. I'm not going to say he did just as good as Noah Fant because I think Noah Fant's a little bit more athletic.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, Noah was out a few games, and Albert O, was able to knock it out of the park. So I don't
Absolutely.
think I don't think Broncos country is going to be missing those three players as much as they're going to be loving Russell Wilson. So, yeah, I think it's a big win for the Broncos.
That's for sure. That's for sure. I totally agree about Alberto. I do think he's definitely going to show out with Russell Wilson. He's definitely underrated for what he can do. And I actually feel like, in terms of being a more complete tight end, he's got a better handle on the blocking side of things than Fant ever did, which is kind of ironic because Fant came out of Iowa, which is known for being a blocking tight end program. But I'm excited for the future for sure. I think all of those guys, including Jerry Jeudy, are going to take huge steps forward with Russell Wilson thrown to him, just like you saw with Peyton Manning and Demaryius Thomas, rest in peace. All those guys. When Peyton Manning came over to the Broncos and just took a team that, granted, did make the playoffs with Tim Tebow, of all people, but every single player on that roster took a huge step forward when this magical god quarterback comes raining down from the sky as a gift to them. So we'll take it.
Can I just say one thing about
Yeah.
the Russ thing, and not to rain on anyone's parade? So the thing that I'm worried about with Russ is, and not like I said, not to rain on anyone's parade, because I'm excited too. Because I live in the city and it's nice to see the city excited again. But are we going to see a similar drop off in the second half of the season that we have the last couple of years in Seattle? Or is that just a Seattle thing?
Yeah. I do think that's really interesting. And it's been something that since he got traded, I've kind of been trying to delve into. From an outsider's perspective, there's only so much you can glean. And I think as a Broncos fan, I probably have a little bit of bias trying to, hope that Russell Wilson is not the problem. But I think that there was a lot of conflict in Seattle regarding or between like Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll regarding how they wanted the game to be operated in terms of like play calling and you heard let Russ cook all the time. And I think really what that was referring to was Pete Carroll has a very specific type of scheme that he goes to in play calling where he wants to run the ball in your face, break you down, and then hit you over the top when you're expecting the run. And Russ does have his tools are centered towards that style of play in a sense that he has an amazing deep ball, and then he can make things happen when the play breaks down, and that's especially where you get a lot of those big chunk plays. But I think what that ended up resulting in was a lot of the offense not being as efficient as it could be. And then it ended up being a situation where Russell Wilson would always have to come back from a deficit because the offense just couldn't get it going beforehand. And so that's where he just kind of, did his magic and won them games and everything. I mean, I think over the course of a season, when you're like playing the same style and not really changing a whole lot of things up, the defense that you face starts to kind of key into a lot of those common things and common strategies that the play calling is putting forth, and it gets a lot harder to have success. So that's kind of my inkling as to part of why maybe Russ wanted out in the first place is like the play calling never let him do him, and actually really play to his strengths and really kind of like, because you always heard about Peyton Manning, for instance, coming up to the line, and he was essentially the offensive coordinator out there, just picking plays based off what he saw on the defense, and he would switch to any number of plays at the line, and I do think Russell Wilson has like the acumen to pull something like that off, but when there's offensive limitations in the form of Pete Carroll's scheme and him being the play caller and saying, no, we're going to do it this way because I have a track record of winning football this way. And then Russ is like, well, number one, I got you that track record in the NFL. And number two, like, I can do a lot more than this. And I'm frustrated that you won't let me, and that's kind of, again, there's only so much that you can say being an outsider, and I could be totally wrong, but that's what I got from watching tape of the Seahawks, listening to some of how they talk and how they've treated this situation. That seems like where a lot of the discourse has been in the conflict.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with that. I definitely do think that Pete Carroll definitely had something to do with, you know, not, and you could just visibly tell the frustration with Russell Wilson. Like you
Yeah.
could see his body language last year in Seattle. And I mean, like, dude came back and was like, I love seeing that video of him doing his pre-workouts with his injured hand, and he doesn't even have a ball, and he's just like going through it like he's getting ready for a game. I love that shit.
Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
that. Love that. Love that. Love that.
Yeah, no, and so to touch on some of the other signings that the Broncos made, in addition to Russell Wilson, first up we have DJ Jones, 3 years, $30 million, with 20 of that being guaranteed, coming over from I'm sorry, not the Chargers, the 49ers. He's a big old defensive tackle, nose tackle. He is one of the best run stoppers in the league, and I'm super excited about that move. And he even mentioned Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson is already doing that work, trying to get guys here and calling them and saying like, "Oh, hey, come to the Broncos." I love that. I love that so much. Next up, we have one that I did want to talk about is Randy Gregory. So this was a really interesting situation. He signed for 5 years, $70 million, and 28 of that being guaranteed. And I believe all of that 28, or at least most of it, is in like the first 2 years. So given his past and the suspensions that he's faced in the past, I think that was kind of a move there to say like, well, if it doesn't work out, we're not going to pay him a full 570 and cut him after 2 years or whatever. And at
Right.
first, when I saw that move, I was kind of iffy because I didn't know a lot about him and his past and his history and all that. But learning more about him and learning more about how he treats that, or his past and his situation, it's really interesting to hear him talk. And it sounds like he's done a lot of self-reflection and change, and that hopefully that won't be an issue for the Broncos. And it sounds like he's in a lot better place for himself. But as far as his contract was concerned, kind of related to his history and all that stuff, the reason why he came to the Broncos and not the Cowboys, returning to the Cowboys as was initially reported, was because of some contract language that the Cowboys kind of put in there at the last second. And from my understanding, basically, were he to be fined, I don't know if it was for anything or for specifically substance abuse policy, but were he to be fined, then the Cowboys could choose to revoke his salary. And so they looked at that, Randy Gregory and his lawyer, and they were like, yeah, no thanks. And they went over to the Broncos. It was kind of a stunner for everybody because everybody thought he was going to be a Cowboy again. And so kind of an interesting situation there. The Cowboys side of it, they said that that's in like every Cowboys contract, other than I guess Dak Prescott. But you would think if they really wanted to make sure, right? Yeah. Of course. I mean, he's the quarterback. They could do whatever they want.
True.
Yeah, but I guess you would think, given his history and given it sounds like the Cowboys have been mostly really good to him as an organization and helping his progress growing from that. And but you would think that they would be a little more sensitive to maybe that would stand out to him and say like, well, no, I don't really want that in my contract. But it lost them Randy Gregory, and he's now a Denver Bronco. He's wearing the number 5, I saw, which is interesting.
Yeah, I'm still. So first, just to touch on it, I'm still not a fan of the number thing. I just want my old football back, but I'm getting used to it. Secondly, real quick on Randy Gregory, super boom or bust, dude. Super boom or bust. It's either going to be amazing and you guys are going to get elite talent, because I remember when the Cowboys took him, I think he dropped into the second or the third round because of his past issues at Nebraska. But I did watch the Cowboys like stick with this guy, and they put a lot of work into him becoming a man. And so I'm hoping that he sticks with it, comes to Denver and knocks it out for you guys. because yeah, that's a lot of money, and the Broncos did it the right way. Give him that guaranteed money right away. That way, if he stops in the last couple of years of his contract playing as well, you guys can let him go. Or if he has issues, you guys can let him go without too much of a cap problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I guess I really didn't even touch on a lot of the football aspect of it with him, because there's just so much to talk about otherwise. But he's got a lot of upside. And he's one of those guys that I believe he's either 28 or 29 years old now. And when you look at that on the surface, you're like, yeesh, kind of getting up there in age. But then you look at the amount of snaps that, in part because of some of his suspensions, but then just dealing with some injuries along the way, he really hasn't played a whole lot in his career. You know what I mean? So, like you said, this could either be boom or bust in that he's this talent that has kind of not really been all the way utilized and still has a lot of tread on the tires, or he flames out and doesn't give the production that we're hoping. Because like when you look at that contract, it's a projection of what it could be. It's not paying for what he has shown that he is, as in terms of stats and everything. You know what I mean? But yeah, so that's definitely an interesting signing. A couple more here. Calvin Anderson and Josie Jewell, two players we re-signed. So Calvin Anderson is a swing tackle, and he is actually going to, part of his deal was apparently that in order to return to the Broncos for a little bit less money than he would have gotten for other teams, he wanted a chance to compete for the starting right tackle job, which he's been our swing tackle for the last couple of years. Super solid. And we really he's been a huge contributor for the last couple of years. But kind of unsure if he's going to be one of those starter guys, but he's going to get an opportunity for us. And I'm glad for him. He's a good person, good player, excited for that. And then Josie Jewell, I believe he was drafted in either 2018 or 2019 from Iowa. And he's an inside linebacker, super, hardworking kind of lunch pail guy. And it gets a lot of tackles, really shoves his nose in there. And he has gotten a lot better over his years in the league and really kind of shined bright for like a few games this last season here before he tore his pectoral and was out the rest of it. But kind of excited that we re-signed him because I thought that he was just finally coming into his own and he's going to do well for us next year. So to move on to some of the underrated departures, I felt like, my first one we kind of touched on a little bit earlier with the Russell Wilson trade. Shelby Harris, he has been one of those players with the Broncos in our bad last 5-6 years. You think about the quarterback carousel and starting Trevor Siemian and Joe Flacco and Case Keenum and a number of people. When Shelby has been here, without fail, every single snap that he's been on the field, even when everybody else was kind of phoning it in, you think about week 17, you're already eliminated from the playoffs. There's nothing to play for. He is one of those players that's always out there giving it 100% and setting the example for a winning culture. So that's one of those guys I'm sad to see leave, but I'm excited to see what he can do with the rest of his career. And then Malik Reed, somebody that we don't actually know if he's left yet. The Broncos actually gave him a first right of refusal tender a couple of days ago. So he's still technically out on the market, but the Broncos are going to get first right of refusal for anybody that does want to try and sign him. And I hope he's a piece that we keep. We did sign Randy Gregory, and we have Chubb on that other side, and then Jonathan Cooper is another young edge for us. And so we got 3 solid guys, but keeping Malik Reed, there's so many possibilities switching out those 4 and keeping everybody fresh throughout the entire game. I think that would be huge if we could keep him, and a little bit, kind of bitter if he did leave. It kind of reminds me of the Shaquille Barrett situation a few years back when he left and went to the Buccaneers, and you look at him, he got a big old contract. If he didn't lead the league in sacks one year, he was like top 3. And that's the talent he had, but it was a situation where the Broncos decided not to pay for him because at the time they had Von Miller on one side and were committing to Shane Ray, who ended up busting on the other side. And so we let him walk, and one of those moves you probably regret. And I don't think Malik Reed is quite as talented, but it kind of gives me that same feeling of somebody that can get a bigger role somewhere else if we don't keep him around. So, and then Kareem Jackson and Melvin Gordon, couple guys that aren't back, could technically be back, but doesn't look likely. And 2 contributors from last year, 2 starters. Melvin Gordon, despite Javonte Williams getting a lot of those carries and really showing out, Melvin Gordon was a huge part of that 2-headed monster. And Javonte Williams, I think you wouldn't want to, overexpend him anyways. I think he's one of those runners that you really want to be fresh at all times when he's on the field. And having a backfield partner in Melvin Gordon or that level was very nice. But there was also, some downsides. When you think of Melvin Gordon, I think a lot of people instantly think of the critical fumbles, especially in the Chiefs game last year. Total momentum changing. Yeah. Total momentum changing fumbles at the worst possible times. And it's not like he's doing it on purpose, but it's one of those things you got to factor in with him. So it's like there's positives to him not being here anymore, but I do think that unless we get some sort of or sign somebody or draft somebody that's going to have even relatively similar impact to him in the running game, even despite the fumbles that he had, our running game might even take a step back this upcoming year. So that'll be interesting to see for sure. And then for the last section in this little Broncos part here, I wanted to talk about my favorite game from watching last season, even though it was not a successful year as usual for the last half decade, but it was a successful game where we beat the absolute brakes off the Cowboys and just destroyed them. I think the final score was like 31-19, and we came out, and the my favorite part of that game was
that's when the Cowboys were undefeated, right?
Yep, they were undefeated, and we came out of nowhere. I mean, like that was when we had fallen. Well, we had like that pretender stage where we were 3-0 and beat just awful teams, and then ended up coming into that game like 4-4. And so everybody was like, yeah, they're bad. And then we just destroyed the Cowboys. My favorite part of that game was the very first drive. Broncos kick off, Cowboys take it, and they get a good return like past the 50. And they get to a 4th and 1. And Justin Simmons comes up and stuffs Ezekiel Elliott behind the line of scrimmage and totally just shifts the momentum of that game. Which had already, with that big return, you're like, Cowboys are going to do it again. They're just going to destroy them. And then that was the first play that kind of set the dominoes forward for the Broncos to have a huge day. And I think that was also the either first or second game after Von Miller had been traded. And so it was kind of a coming out party for Justin Simmons as a leader on that team. Because there was a void to fill after Von Miller had left. And you think about the presence, that he had in that locker room, being one of the only Super Bowl winners left other than our kicker, Brandon McManus, everybody looking up to him. And then this was Justin Simmons saying, this is my team now, making those big plays, those momentum shifting plays, and getting all of his guys riled up, to say, heck yeah, let's go win this game, and then Javonte had a huge game, 17 carries for 111 yards. He had like that NFL Network weekly segment, the Angry Runs. He got on that for that. And then Teddy, for once, had a good game, 19-28 and 249 with a touchdown. Didn't make mistakes and just let it happen. And that's really when Teddy just played kind of neutral and let the talent take itself there. We were able to do some fun things last year, and I'm thankful to Teddy for being on the Broncos and given the effort that he gave. I'm excited for him. He got signed by the Miami Dolphins for, I believe it was a 1-year, $7 million deal to be Tua's backup. So
Absolutely. Shout out Teddy Bridgewater. Everywhere that guy goes, good things happen. When he was a Jet, good things happen. Comes down, becomes a Bronco, good things happen. And yeah, also shout out for him getting the opportunity to go down there and back up Tua. And I mean, depending on how good Tua plays, Teddy could be in a role trying to take the starting job down there in Miami too.
it could happen. It really could happen. I'm interested to see what happens down there with Mike McDaniels and their new head coach. And, they've got an interesting situation down there and still a talented roster, though they lost some pieces. So yeah, that's definitely a team to watch. And Teddy is a floor raiser as a player. I think it's easy to criticize his play, but when you look at him as a person and what he brings to a locker room and an organization, I think that if you go into the Denver Broncos headquarters and ask every single player that was there last year, they would tell you that they grew and took positives from Teddy Bridgewater being a part of their locker room. And like you said, that's kind of part of what follows him, is he's just a good dude and good things happen when he's around you. So excited for him for sure. And that Broncos Cowboys game was one of the only fun games as a Broncos fan last year. It was fun to kind of reflect on the last season when, us not having a top tier quarterback, and now we're going to go into the next season with Russell Wilson. So that's interesting. And so for our last segment today, we're going to start talking about some of the things happening over in the NBA. To kind of introduce, since this is our first episode, being in Denver, being a Broncos fan, I'm naturally a Nuggets fan. I like the Sixers also. I grew up watching Allen Iverson, and then he came over to the Nuggets. So, that kind of cemented that for me. But I'm a Nuggets fan. Enrique is a Lakers fan. We'll mostly probably just talk about those two teams, other than maybe some big stuff going on throughout the league. But those are really the teams that we focus on. And to start off today, I'll probably talk about some Nuggets stuff here. Bones Highland, my favorite player in the league right now. I'm going to tell you that, even over Jokic. He's just infectious. If you haven't heard about this guy, he's a rookie. He is the most positive, happy-go-lucky dude I think you'll ever see. And he just lights up a room when he walks into it. You know what I mean? And he's had a couple of good breakout games throughout this first season of his, and he was a rising star over the All-Star break, which was very cool to see. But he faced well, fair. But so the Nuggets went over to Philadelphia and faced the 76ers earlier this week, and Bones Highland had 21 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists on 7 of 14 shooting, 4 of 9 from 3, and then 3 of 5 from free throw, which, not amazing stats, but the situation and the way that he got those points was really interesting and impactful. He, in 2018, was actually victim to a house fire that ended up taking the lives of his grandma and his cousin, I believe it was, and he had to jump out a window from the second story to escape that apartment, and was told he would never play basketball again. And he lived in Wilmington, Delaware, and a lot of those fans, fairly close to Philadelphia, they came over and were in the crowd to watch him play against the 76ers. And he put up 21 points and all of that. And the firefighters specifically that came and helped him gave him this custom jacket. And I thought that was such a cool story to hear about, not only him overcoming, awful situation like that, but to see the success that he's starting to have in the league and some of those breakout games, rather. Really cool to see. And a quote from him here kind of regarding it. Every time I check into the game, I do across my chest just to be thankful that I'm still in this position just to play basketball, because doctors told me 4 years ago I'd never play basketball again. So very inspiring to see. Super cool story for sure. And
Dude,
then
absolutely.
one more thing of Nuggets news here. Uh, Everybody talks about the Nuggets not being necessarily, a real contender because of their injury circumstances with MPJ and Jamal Murray being out for the majority of this season. However, things are starting to heat up in that area just a little bit, just a little bit. Jamal Murray earlier this week got sent down to the Grand Rapids Gold, which is the Nuggets G League team, to practice for a couple of days, and he is progressing on his knee recovery, and MPJ could even return within a week, is by some reports. So things are heating up for the Nuggets, and I think when you look at how Jokic has carried that team throughout this season, I think we're like a 5 or 6 seed right now. And then you think about Jamal Murray and MPJ getting back, I think it makes Nuggets fans salivate just a little bit coming up for these playoffs. But that's enough of the Nuggets for now. How about we talk about a little bit of the Lakers?
Absolutely. So just to tie back to Bones, that story about the fire, I did not know about that in the least bit whatsoever. That's a crazy, amazing story, and that's super cool that they still show him the love that they show him, even though they're playing against the hometown 76ers.
Yeah.
But all right, so unfortunately, the Lake Show's not doing too great, and that's pretty noticeable, right? Um, First and foremost, we're the 9th seed right now. Our record's 30-40. The West is tough. The West is tough. The West is really, really tough right now. You have, obviously, like you said, the Nuggets balling out. You have the Clippers balling. It seems like every time we play the Clippers, they're embarrassing us right now. Which, I mean, if we lost all of our games, but we only beat the Clippers, I'd be okay with that, because that's like it's just to go back to the NFL. If we lost all of our games, so the Jets beat the Patriots 2 times a year, I'd be okay with that,
Yeah.
because when you lose to your rival that way, it's demoralizing. It truly
Yeah.
is. And the thing that we see all too often is it falls back on LeBron to do it all. And at this stage in his career, he's just a bit too old to really be putting on his shoulders like that. I was hoping to see a lot more Anthony Davis, obviously. And to say that Anthony Davis is his health has got to be first and foremost, because it just seems like every time he's able to get back on the court, he has another setback, something gets re-injured, something gets hurt again. So for him to be able to get his health, I guess prioritize his health so that way he can have a long career in the NBA. That's definitely something that I'm hoping he's able to do. And I mean, we kind of knew that this might be the case with this roster, the way it was built, because it is older guys. And then obviously the biggest thing is that, Russ just hasn't fit as nice as we thought he was going to.
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily sure. I think there's lots of factors that go into that. But I mean, if I'm being honest with you, I think Russ plays a little bit emotional, and I think he's unconfident right now. I think he's really unconfident. I've heard him make comments about like outside stuff, like what fans are talking about, and I've heard him make a few comments about stuff like that in previous years. But I think this is really the first year that I've ever really, like, most of the stories that I hear about Russell Westbrook is that he's talking about stuff that why the fans are criticizing him so much. And I think at this point in his career, obviously, Father Time catches up to you. I think he's just starting to kind of lose himself in his head a little bit, and I think that's really, and I think in the NBA, I think the mental aspect is super important, because at any time when Russ decides to turn it on and he's feeling himself, he's unstoppable. But when he's not able to feel himself, he's not able to do the things that he believes he's able to do. I think that's just kind of what you're getting. And so ultimately, I would love to see what next year brings. But I don't necessarily know, because if I'm being honest with you, I think LeBron is kind of in a I think LeBron's okay if he never wins another ring. I think he wants to win another ring, but I think
Right.
he understands that he's getting towards the end of his career, and I think he's just waiting for Bronny to come so that way he can go play with his son, which that man's the GOAT. That man is the king for a reason. If he decides he doesn't care about basketball anymore and he just wants to play for his son, then cool. I'll watch him play basketball until he's ready to be done. And even if he's
Yeah.
only, even if it's just like him and Bronny are playing for, the Washington Wizards, like, I'm good with it. It doesn't even matter at that point. So seeing how the Lakers are relatively unfortunate. I mean, other big stuff in the NBA. Warriors killing it. 76ers killing it. I think right now it's probably a battle between Jokic and Embiid for the MVP, right? Do you see anybody else in that?
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. I think it's Jokic and Embiid. I would maybe say Giannis is always in that competition. He's always amazing to watch. If you
Dude,
ask
monster.
me, being a Nuggets fan, Jokic has been the MVP this entire year, just purely because of the amount that he's doing and the efficiency he's doing it on, and the fact that our team is so injury ridden, you know what I mean, and has been, and he has carried us this entire time. He's put up absurd numbers, and so has Embiid and Giannis. But I just, for me, if you ask me, I'm saying Jokic. But some of the other big NBA stories, one thing that was pretty interesting was, speaking of the Warriors, Steph, Draymond, and Clay played their first game back together in 1,005 days. It was a 126 over 120, or 126 to 112 win over the Wizards. And Curry scored 47, 6, and 6 on 16 of 25 from the field, 7 of 14 from three, and then 8 of 8, 100% from the free throw. And I believe it was his birthday. So yeah, that was a fun game for sure.
That's crazy. And well, let me say this real quick. Um, Shout out to Klay Thompson for not giving up, dude, because
Yeah.
you got two like back-to-back life-changing injuries, career-changing injuries, and never once like did he do the pity party thing. He never once, he just literally said like, yeah, I'm gonna come back. And 1,005 days for those three to be playing together again is crazy. And also shout out Steph and shout out Draymond for holding down the fort until Clay got back. Now
Yeah.
with Clay being back, it's going to be able to take a lot. And I mean, I think we're starting to see that now. It's starting to take some stuff off of Steph to where, he can kind of be a situational player when he wants to be. He doesn't have to be the main focus of everyone. Because
Right.
when you have the Splash Brothers back, it's shooter's going to shoot, Ryan. Shooter's going to shoot.
Absolutely. And that's really when he thrived the most, wasn't it? When even Kevin Durant was there, and he was it was Steph's team. But I would say that Steph was the second option at a lot of those times during those Warriors years with Kevin Durant, just because Kevin Durant is so freaking talented and he can do so much. And that really played into his game, letting him, run around the court without the ball and get open and just pop off those quick threes. And I think you're seeing definitely a lot of that come back, like you said, with both Clay and Draymond coming back and helping take some of the attention off of them. Because when you just have Steph Curry out there, he'll still drop 40 on your head, but it's certainly a lot harder for him when he doesn't have those guys out there, and especially Draymond that he plays off of so much on that pick and roll and all that. And then, so for our last big story of the day, wanted to talk about Greg Popovich. He passed Don Nelson for the most all-time wins as a head coach in the NBA at 1,336. He's in his 26th season now, which is now the longest of any coach in all 4 major U.S. sports leagues, which is just crazy. Yeah, and then quote from him on that, he says, "It's just a testament to a whole lot of people," Popovich said. Something like this does not belong to one individual. Basketball is a team sport. You preach to your players that they have to do it together, and that's certainly been the case in my life with all the wonderful players and coaches, the staff that I've been blessed with, and the support of this wonderful city. The fans support us no matter what. All of us share in this record. It's not mine, it's ours here in the city. And if that doesn't speak to Greg Popovich as a person and a coach, I don't know what does. That's been his mentality the entire time he's been coaching. You think about, I always think about the Spurs as kind of like the Patriots of the NBA, in the sense that, they're doing it the hard-nosed right way. They're, very technical, very about the game within the game. And just an organization run with pride and run the right way. And a huge part of that has always been Greg Popovich. So glad to see him get his flowers a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. And I mean, ever since like I watched NBA in the least bit, Greg Popovich has been a part of it.
Yeah.
And even more so, like he is what the quote that you read off is just like you said, it's a perfect example of the type of man he is. Because in a lot of times when you really could just say, yeah, I mean, I did do that, because he did do that.
Yeah.
He credits it back to the city, and he credits it back to his staff, and he credits it back to his guys,
Yeah.
because coaches coach, players play. But ultimately, like, it's the fact that he brought it back and gave it back to everybody that really shows that, this is why you have over 1,000 wins, and this is why you're the longest tenured coach in any of the 4 US. That's a crazy stat. That's a
Yeah, it
crazy,
is.
crazy stat. Like, because I thought for sure that was going to be like a baseball record, like, just one dude, just 30 seasons just in that same position, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the fact that you did it in the NBA, with how the NBA has changed it just so drastically from when he first initially started, the NBA is totally different, and he's still able to put out this very consistent, like, I don't even know anyone on the Spurs right now. I cannot tell you one Spurs player right now. Not at all. Not even one. But still out here putting out consistency. And
Yeah.
I mean, the great players that he's had, the Tim Duncans, it just really goes to show that, yeah, these guys really respect him, and they play their heart out for him, man. And he does the same thing. He puts his heart out for the city and for his guys. So yeah, congratulations to Pop for sure, because that is there's just some records that are never going to get broken, and if
Yeah.
they ever do, then that, like, dang, that dude really came and broke that record, because that was a crazy record to break. Yeah, this is one that should be everlasting for sure. I don't know that anyone gets more than 1,300 wins. Like, that's
Yeah.
crazy. That's
It's so crazy.
especially in the hardest league. This isn't college or like high school. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is the NBA, and he's got the rings to back it up. Like,
Exactly.
it is crazy.
And it's one thing to dominate for a little bit of time, and it's a whole different thing to dominate for 26 seasons. It's,
26
you
seasons.
have to be always evolving as a coach and changing in your strategies. There's so many one-note coaches that you can think of that did have success and, maybe won a ring or two. But at the same time, they didn't have the flexibility that these longer-term coaches have to change it up and stay alive and stay successful for as long as somebody like Greg Popovich has. So, like you said, congratulations to him. That's such a crazy stat. and super cool to see. And I think that's going to do it for us today, Enrique. I have to say that was pretty fun for a first episode.
Yeah, I think that was a good episode. I think it was perfect. I think we hit on all the big ones. I mean, talked about Deshaun, still crazy to me. The AFC West is loaded. The Nuggets look good. They're about to get healthy and make a run, hopefully. And Russell Wilson's a Bronco. I guess everything's cool in Denver, Colorado right now. Everybody's loving life in Denver.
That's for sure. All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been the Mile High Flight Show, and we will be back next week.